I started smoking weed on the outside of a friend's house at 13 years old, but it wasn't until I drove drunk home from a party at 19 while I was in college and completely blacked out. I was apparently driving on the wrong side of the road and I almost killed myself. That was when I finally turned my life around. I knew I always wanted to accomplish something big, but I didn't know how. So at 19 years old, after nearly dying, I picked up my first self-development book and everything in my life changed after that. From then until now, I've built businesses with over $450 million in sales, and I've also been able to help people start businesses from scratch with around $10 billion in sales. What I've learned after reading hundreds of self-development books, going to every seminar I could find, and applying all of this stuff in my real life over the past 20 years is that everything starts in your head. So I put everything that I've learned over the past 20 years into a course that I called the Inner Power Protocol. And my plan was to sell this, but I decided just to give it away for free right here on YouTube. Now, I do have to warn you that the video quality isn't fantastic, and I thought about just not publishing it because of that, but I decided, heck, if somebody ends up benefiting from this, then who cares if it ends up not looking that great on me? So please drop a comment below if you find value in what I'm about to share.
Peter Thiel co-founded both PayPal and Palantir, and today is worth about $20 billion. He said, "What's preventing you from achieving your 10-year goal in the next 6 months?" Almost all of your success starts in your head. It's not some strategy that you're missing. It's not some technique or relationship or resource that you don't have access to or can't go get if you have enough drive and motivation. It's because you haven't rewired your brain to think in the right way to accomplish what you want yet. At 19 years old, I attended a party when I was in college, and at the time I was still trying to figure out how to make something of my life. And so I was one of the earliest people to that party, and I proceeded to get very drunk to the point where I was basically blacking out. I then ended up picking a fight with a guy who was completely sober, which is also very stupid for a lot of reasons. And I don't know what happened. I basically blacked out. The next morning I woke up, my face was all bloody and bruised and swollen, and I felt ashamed and miserable. And so I basically went back to the house I shared with a few friends in college and shut myself in the room for a week, trying to figure out, what am I doing with my life? Like, why am I doing this and how do I turn it around? Because I'd always had these big dreams and aspirations. I just didn't know how to put the pieces together. Then at that point, I ended up finding a self-development book, the first one I'd ever read, which was Success Principles by Jack Canfield. And that opened my eyes. I couldn't read more than a few pages without having a huge epiphany about my life. I'm like, oh, all these years, I was only 19 at the time, but for maybe 14, 15 years, I knew I wanted to create something more of my life. And I finally found out that there are certain techniques, mental techniques, you can use to achieve what you want. You can turn ideas in your head to realities in the real world. Anything you've ever created this far, unless it was just given to you by a parent or family member, has been because you had an idea in your head and you created that in the real world. And so ever since that point at 19 years old, I've been obsessed with self-development. Now I took a big path down the business world and ended up, making my first million at 25, and then built a lot of other businesses that today have sold over $450 million in sales, and also have been able to help a lot of people build businesses through my company Amazing.com and the course that I originally created called Amazing Selling Machine. We've helped tens of thousands of people across the world. But in that whole time period, I've been studying and learning from the world's greatest people, the people that have accomplished the most, and not just in money and wealth, though that is super important, but in all areas of life. And I've kept reading. I read, something like 100 books a year. And so I've been obsessed with this topic of self-development and how to get the most out of our lives since I was 19 years old. And what I've noticed in all the experience, I think I've been teaching people to build businesses since 2012, so that's 13 plus years now. What I've noticed is that the reason some people don't succeed, even though we all have access to everything in the world, we all have access to computers, we have access to the internet, to cell phones, we don't need anything else. All the information and resources and people are out there for us to accomplish literally anything. It all comes down to what's in our head. But self-development is very confusing. There's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, and a lot of stuff from people who've never really actually accomplished anything, which is unfortunate, still spouting out ideas that are maybe kind of unproven or untested, at least in their own lives. And so I decided for the first time to take a step back from teaching all the business and tactics and all that kind of stuff, because I believe this is more foundational, more important for myself, but also for anybody else who wants to achieve any sort of success and satisfaction and fulfillment and total life fulfillment. I mean, across your health, your wealth, your relationships, your fulfillment, that all ends up coming together to produce better success in any one individual area. And we'll talk more about that in a second. And if you haven't accomplished what you want so far, don't worry, it's not your fault. You've probably been exposed to the wrong people, the wrong ideas, or it was just confusing to make sense of all this stuff. And it's really hard sometimes to sort through the ideas that are proven and tested, in some cases backed up by science, versus all the ones that people just say are good ideas and they're kind of repeating ideas from other people. So don't worry, we're going to sort through all of that stuff over these 4 videos. So this video series that I'm calling the Inner Power Protocol, this is for anybody. So if you own a successful business, 7-figure, 8-figure, maybe even 9-figure business, and you want to learn how to get to the next level in your business, in wealth, and the other areas of your life, this is for you. If you're just starting your first business, just getting it off the ground, or just looking to get started, this is going to help you accelerate your success so much faster. You can compress what would take other people 5 and 10 years if they're constantly fighting against themselves and are out of alignment, which we'll talk a lot about. You can compress that down into 12 months, maybe 24 months when you get some of these fundamental principles right that we're going to talk about in this video series. So the big thing I want you to discover and to learn that I haven't really heard anybody else talk about is a concept that I'm calling energetic alignment. Now it sounds very woo-woo and sort of hippie, but that's not really my thing. As if you've seen any of my other stuff, you probably would know by now. But this concept is extremely important, and it's the best name that I have for it. It's when all of your life, when your thoughts, your actions, your beliefs, all of that is in alignment and going in one direction. So you're not like a rowboat with 4 people in there and they're all kind of pulling in different directions. You're going completely aligned, and you don't have any sort of skeletons in the closet or things you haven't addressed that are holding you back, likely subconsciously. And so when everything is in complete alignment, then you wake up. I'm sure you've had the feeling at times when you woke up or you were just on fire in a day and everything is clicking, you feel high energy, you're optimistic, you're positive, and you're like, man, if I could just feel like this all the time, I could accomplish anything. I know I have. I've been chasing that feeling and that state for a decade now. And I think I've finally, after all this time period, finally figured out how to engineer it. Now I have my own bad days. I had one a couple weeks ago or so. But I'm able to get myself back on track way faster. And that saves tons of time. Whereas in the past, it could take me 2 or 3 days to start figuring out, like, why am I so negative? Why am I so unproductive? Why do I not feel like doing anything? Why am I questioning everything? And now I can hopefully compress that in most cases down to less than an hour. So then I'm back on track and going after what matters most to me in life. So that's what I hope for you to accomplish. And that's the power of this protocol. And so what I want you to understand is that this concept, energetic alignment, or whatever you want to call it, some form of alignment, is the key to accomplishing your biggest goals without really working harder, without struggling more, and while having a hell of a lot more fun in the process. So now let's cover the 4 parts of the Inner Power Protocol that we're going to go through in this video series. So number 1 is to accept. You've got to accept your current reality and not hide from it, but then also accept that you're going to have a much bigger goal, likely than the one you've been pursuing so far. And we'll talk more about that today. Number 2, which is in the next video, is to adopt. Adopt certain beliefs and standards for your life that are proven to move you forward, that other people, billionaires, the highest performers in life, people that I've studied, I've used these in myself, that have achieved the most in life, specific beliefs and patterns and standards that you can put in place immediately that day that'll elevate your life. And then number 3 is to activate. So this is all about daily things you can do to prepare your mind for the uncertainties of every day and make sure that you're focused every single day on what matters most, and you're way more resilient and less likely to get derailed when stuff goes wrong in life or unpredictable bad stuff, which can happen any given day and does happen a lot of times, that you're not immediately thrown off track for days or weeks or months or even years or the rest of your life, that you're able to stay on track and keep moving forward. Then the last step, number 4, is to accelerate. So this is an interesting step because this is what I've spent a lot of my time teaching people how to do. This is your tactics and your strategies and all of that sort of stuff. The problem is, and the reason I'm creating this program, the Inner Power Protocol, is that if all you focus on is this accelerate step, the strategies and tactics, is that you're going to likely apply them not fully, not properly, or not at all if you haven't first worked on these other steps, especially accept, knowing your goal that you're really after, accepting your current reality, not hiding from certain areas of your life that you've been putting off or ignoring, that when left unaddressed, like your health even, for example, which we'll talk about, that can pull back your progress in every other area of your life. So you have to address these areas before you start working on this one. And this has kind of been the missing piece that I have not taught that much yet and didn't really have a great framework for until now. But this is what makes accelerate work. So then today we're focusing on accept. And so right now we're going to talk about 3 specific tools that you can use right now to get in tune and start aligning this area of your life. So the first tool, big goals. I did a whole lot of research. I ended up taking like 50 pages of notes on all the current science on goal setting. And what I discovered, one of the biggest facts is, there's all the obvious stuff. Write down specific goals. Yes, goals move performance, all that sort of stuff. And one of the also interesting things is that it's kind of unclear from the research, but I've heard other people talk about this, and there's some reason subconsciously that I think this makes sense also, is you probably don't want to tell other people your goals. There's some reasons people think that you're kind of like almost getting the reward in advance, but I think the big thing is that most of the people around you are probably, unfortunately, not going to support you. It's just a quirk of human nature that when somebody says they're going to do something, your immediate reaction is like, oh no, likely not, that's not going to happen. Like you have them in a box mentally and they want to go outside of that box and do something completely new. You likely don't trust that they're actually going to do it or going to succeed until you see some level of proof. And so it's an unfortunate part of human nature, other than if you're dealing with a very special kind of small segment of people. But otherwise, you probably don't want to tell people your goals. So that's just a little tip. But the big thing with goal setting is bigger goals are what really moves the needles. Sure, if you're like a 5'2" person and you're 40 years old, you're not going into the NBA. So I'm not going to tell you to set any goal, doesn't matter, physics and all that sort of stuff doesn't come into play. So as long as the goal is possible, which really means has somebody else done it? If somebody else has done it, then that's very likely that you can do it as well. Now, if you're pushing the boundaries of physics or in a company, or if you're like, I want to build the first, $100 trillion company or something, I don't know. But most of the goals that we're after, somebody's already done. You want to make $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, $1 billion. You want to build a company. You want to find a spouse. You want to make lots of friends. You want to pursue a hobby, donate money. All these things people have done. There's no reason why you can't do them too. And so we'll talk more about how to find those people and how to use those as examples to accelerate your success in video number 4. But for now, just know that bigger goals are what's actually going to move the needle. But the problem is that in most cases, you've likely been reducing the size of your goals the older you've gotten. Like when you were young, you probably had big dreams, big aspirations, you want to be president, whatever it was. But then over time, you're like, reality set in, life is hard, I've had setbacks, I've had people told me it's not possible, all of that kind of stuff. And so you've likely been reducing the size of your goals over time. And what I want you to do is to try on much bigger goals. When I was first building my business, one of the reasons, the only thing that I could figure out is that how did I accelerate so much faster than some of these other people that had a head start on me? They were older, they'd been involved in internet marketing longer than me. The only difference I could really find, I wasn't any smarter, I didn't work any harder, any of that kind of stuff. The only difference was I was aiming for a bigger target. Their goal was to build $1 million business or $10 million business. To me, I wanted to go to at least $100 million, likely $1 billion or more. To be honest, and I can say this now because I've had this goal on for a long time, is I really wanted to build $1 billion company and $1 billion net worth. Doesn't mean that it's all the most important thing in the world or any of that kind of stuff. It's more just a game, but that was a target, and that still is a target that I have. And so that has kind of forced me to make different decisions than somebody that's shooting for $10 million. They do a nice product launch or something, they make $5 million, they're almost there. Like, they're almost done. And so they're just going to be coasting from that point on. And I've seen that very often. And so step number one is to set a bigger goal. And the easiest way to do this is to write down, you can pause this video and do this now, write down your current goal for your life, for your business, for whatever area of life is most important to you, likely something related to wealth, but doesn't have to be. And then what I want you to do, like Peter Thiel said, is either shrink the time, so he said 10 years to 6 months, either shrink the time dramatically or increase the magnitude of the goal by 10x. So if you want to make $1 million or $10 million or have $1 million or $10 million business, multiply that times 10, add a zero, see how that feels. You're likely going to find that it excites you, that it lights you up a little bit more. And then there's nothing crazy about it. All you're doing is adding an extra zero, likely doing something hundreds, if not thousands of people have done before you. So increase the size of your goal and sort of try to get back in touch with what goals you had before you started reducing them. So that's number one, is when we talk about accept the goal that you really want. It may be multiple goals, but likely the goal that you've probably put aside for a while or have not been ambitious enough about. So that's step number one. Number two is to face reality. So we put on an event in St. Lucia probably 10 years ago now, and our business was growing like crazy, tons of money coming in, but our finance and accounting was a disaster. Like, it was about to be literally a legal liability because our taxes were not in order, any of that kind of stuff. But we were just so busy making money, and we'd had some finance people that were a disaster, they were no good. And then one of the guys at the talk had been ahead of me in terms of business experience and all that sort of stuff, and he was giving a presentation. He was just talking in general about entrepreneurs and finance and how most of them, and he showed this image of an ostrich sticking its head in the sand and said, this is how most entrepreneurs deal with problems in finance and accounting and that sort of thing. And that really hit me. That image has stuck with me ever since. And the reason is because that's exactly how I was acting about our finance and accounting. And when I finally had that wake-up call and I talked to him a bit about it afterwards, he was like, look, Matt, he's like, all you have to do is go get an outsourced CFO that comes with a bookkeeper and all that, have them prepare regular financials for you, meet with them once a week to talk about any sort of outstanding items, what's this bill, what's this charge, for 30 minutes, and then meet with them for about 2 hours a month to go over your financials, your profit and loss, your balance sheet, your cash flow. That's it. It's not zero, but it's not a lot either in terms of work. And so I started facing these problems head on, and everything changed in business. That area was no longer a problem. I basically had some form of that same exact system in place ever since then. And so I find a lot of people, they are very reluctant to face reality in all areas of their life, and that ends up causing issues in other areas of their life. And so if it's your finances, you've got to face that stuff head on. If you are burning money every month in your business, you've got to face it head on. Hiding from it or distracting yourself with other things is not going to solve any sort of problems. Same thing applies to health. If you've got a health issue, don't delude yourself. Deal with it now, face it, and go get these necessary biomarkers, whether it's a blood test or body composition or whatever. Deal with that stuff sooner rather than later. My dad has been involved in alternative medicine for 30 plus years now, and he says all the time, a lot of these problems people have, if they just dealt with them earlier, they wouldn't really be much of problems. And so this applies to business, to health, to just about every single relationships. I know a friend of mine, he and his wife were getting a divorce, and they were doing some sort of relationship counseling. And he was like, man, Matt, he's like, they had a kid and stuff too. And so he was like, I wish we would have done this way before, but it's too late now. And so that was not dealing with the problem when it was a small problem, because that small problem became a much bigger problem. So we have to face reality in every single area of our life. And that brings me to the third tool, which is total success, also known as the 4 engines. So when I talk about total success, I'm talking specifically about what I'm considering kind of 4 engines. And so if I do my best to draw a simple little plane, So we've got the cockpit, we've got the wings, we've got the body of the plane, the other wing, some wheels, kind of looks like a spaceship, but that's okay. And so we've got our engines here. Each one of these engines represents a certain area of your life. And so the areas that I like to divide them into: wealth, health, relationships, and fulfillment. And I'll write these again in a second so it's a little bit better. But wealth, health, relationships, and fulfillment. And so a lot of times in life, we're just chugging along with one of these things. So we're doing the bare minimum in, say, health, relationships, and fulfillment. And we're really kind of chugging along with this one. And that'll work for a period of time. Some of these planes, like I was looking this up, like a 747, is designed to fly with only 2 engines. So you could completely kill all your relationships and all your hope and fulfillment. And for a period of time, it's not going to be the smoothest flight. It's not going to work well long term. And eventually you're going to crash. But for a period of time, you can drive with just 1 or 2 of these areas. But eventually, to produce the best flight, the best result, the best outcome, you need all of these working well, all of them doing well simultaneously. And so what I would like you to do is, you can pause this video to do it or do it afterwards, is I want you to draw something like this. And so each one of these represents one of those boxes. So this we'll say is health, wealth, relationships, and fulfillment. And so what I would like you to do is kind of rate each one of these areas of your life. And so this being 10 out of 10 if you get all the way to the outside circle. And so I first heard about this, just to give credit where credit is due. I saw this at a Tony Robbins event. He has a different sort of criteria. I think he has 6 areas, similar kind of concept, just finding some way to bucket the major areas of your life, because it all ends up affecting every other area of your life. And I'll give you an example really quickly when it comes to building wealth. And so let's say your health. You're like, health, yeah, pretty good. Let's say 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, like I'm doing really well. Get my pin back. And you're like, okay, yeah, health is looking good. And then you're saying, fulfillment, I'm feeling really good. I feel very fulfilled in life. That's all good. Relationships, they're also pretty good, 7 out of 10. But then you're like, wealth, not so good. I'm broke. I don't have enough money. I don't have the money to do whatever I want to do with. And so I want you to rate each one of these areas of your life. Now, you may find a different result here, because what I find sometimes is that everyone, is pursuing lots of wealth. But, maybe they already make a decent amount of money, and so maybe they're like a 4 out of 10 here. And then fulfillment, pretty low, but they don't have high standards there, so they're like, still, 7 out of 10 or whatever, that's fine. Relationships also, 7 out of 10, like it's doing pretty good. But then they have a big health issue. They're 100 pounds overweight. They have some unaddressed health concern. So that, if they were being honest with themselves, could be like a 1. And this could be all of the difference and the reason you keep sabotaging yourself in terms of wealth. And so to show you what this looks like, I'm going to give you an example. So let's say you're like, okay, my big goal is wealth. I want to make lots of money. So I have lots of freedom. I've heard some people say that if you have a bunch of money, then you can do all these other things, which to some extent is true. But your current reality in terms of wealth, let's just focus on that one. Let's change it to a different color. Your current reality, you've got income you would want to look at. You've got your net worth you want to look at. You've got the amount of debt and freedom. To me, if I was to do a checkup on somebody in terms of their wealth, like where are you at today, I would look at these certain areas. But how are you going to address these things? Well, you basically need to earn more money. You can only save so far, and I was pushing for a while, the past year or two, that, you just got to save, everyone's just not saving enough and that sort of thing. But in reality, I read a book that was very interesting, and they made a very strong case that in most cases, some people will burn all their money even if they have a very high income, but in most cases, the people with the most money just made the highest income. And so that's a good point to learn. So in most financial problems, the way to get out of them is to earn more money. You can only save so much. If you're burning your cash on whatever, sure, cut back on expenses, but you really need to earn more money. And so if you want to do that, how are you going to make more money? So let's come up with some ideas. So How to make money. What are you going to do to make money? Think about that right now. You can build a business. You can try stuff such as different channels to growing the business, different products. You need to learn a whole lot, read books, learn from other people. You're going to have to deal with setbacks. You're going to have to ignore the bunch of haters that'll come out of there, friends, family, people that don't even know you on social media. You'll have to level up your network. How are you going to do all this stuff is the big question. How are you going to make yourself do all of these things? It all ends up coming down to having a hell of a lot of energy and motivation. That's what we're talking about here, is to be able to do any of the stuff you're going to have to do. You're going to have to figure out a way to really ramp up your energy and motivation. Because a lot of times, like I said, we have access to everything we could ever possibly need. The problem is not that we don't have access to stuff. The problem is that we don't use what we have access to because we're sabotaging ourselves with the other areas of our lives. And so what we're trying to accomplish here, we're trying to get our goals, our reality, our actions and thoughts all in alignment. When we do this, we have more energy, we have more motivation, we have more drive, and we actually use all of the resources that we have access to. So in conclusion, the big point of this first video is that all success starts in your head, and you start building that momentum by facing the reality of what goal you actually want to accomplish. And then also, where are you at in these different areas of your life? I encourage you to do the goal exercise, amplify the magnitude of your goal, or shrink the time period down of your goal. Either magnify it by 10x or shrink it by 10% of the time that you think that it was going to take you to accomplish to get yourself back on track to thinking bigger. Then I would like you to rate yourself in each of those 4 areas of your life based on the standards that you think you should be accomplishing right now. Where are you at? 0 to 10, health, wealth, relationships, fulfillment. Because if one of those is really lacking, you're going to be sabotaging yourself and you're not going to have the energy and drive and motivation, and especially longevity, to push forward no matter which goal is most important to you. And in the next video, video number 2, I'm going to share how to discover your life's purpose with one question in less than 10 minutes. Now I'd like to close with one more quote from the billionaire Peter Thiel. Ralph Waldo Emerson captured this ethos when he wrote, "Shallow men believe in luck, believe in circumstances. Strong men believe in cause and effect." Our inner success is the cause that produces outer success, which is the effect. And that's what you're going to learn how to produce in the rest of this video series. For 4 years, I worked with a business coach who actually ended up being more of a life coach. He had taken a business public when he was in his late 20s. And then, his father died, he got cancer and became a practicing Buddhist and sort of incorporated that into his life. And one time we were having a discussion and I just kind of casually threw out, I was like, well, we only have one life to live. And I was justifying some belief based on that. And he was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, well, I never thought about that. I didn't really necessarily believe in reincarnation. Still don't know if I necessarily believe in that today. But then he asked me something that changed my life forever. He said, would you live a better life if you thought you lived multiple lives? And that idea stuck with me, that we can change our beliefs and we should choose our beliefs based on what's going to create the best life for us. So welcome back to the Inner Power Protocol. So far in video 1, we talked about the power of accepting your current situation, facing reality, and remembering the big goals that you once had for your life, and to amplify the magnitude of your goals or shrink their timeline to get yourself remotivated. So now we're going to talk about the second part of this process, which is to adopt. So you've already accepted where you're at today. You've taken a good hard look at your current reality and the goals you want to accomplish. Now you need to adopt certain beliefs that are going to activate an energy in you that may have been hidden for a long time. And so the way we do this is a technique that I call reality rewrite. So it gives you the power, like I told you about the reincarnation story with my business coach, is you can choose the beliefs that you have. You don't have to stick with the ones that your parents gave you, that society gave you, that you've had stuck in your head because of some TV show or something you watched 20 years ago. You can choose what goes into your head, and it all starts right here. So I want to introduce you to a concept that I'm calling reality rewrite. This is the process to control what's going on in your mind so you produce the best life possible. So there's 3 parts to this. First one, life purpose question, which we'll talk about. Second, empowering beliefs. And the third, new standards. So we're going to go into each one of these things. The first thing I want to talk about is the life purpose question. So I came across a video not that long ago from Steven Pressfield. He was being interviewed by Oprah. He's the author of the book War of Art. He said in there that everybody has a calling. And he said you just need a way to bring it out. And one of the tools that he gave to bring it out was this question. If you had just 3 months left to live, what would you do? For me, the answer was very clear. I would take the information that I have, that I've learned, and I'd share it with other people. I would try to encourage others based on my experience to live better lives through writing, through videos, through courses like this, and that kind of what brings me here. That's what lights me up. That's what I love to do. Your answer may be totally different. You know, there's a guy named Laird Hamilton who's a big wave surfer who's been surfing these massive, 50 plus foot waves for decades now. He's 61 years old and he's still at it. He's still surfing these big waves. And it's a very inspiring story, not just for people as you get older that you can still do these cool things. That's just what's possible as a human. And so he's found his own way to do what he loves. And I believe that if he had 3 months left to live, he'd still be surfing those waves. Warren Buffett would still be investing. And so your answer may be totally different, but I think what it all ends up coming down to is we're all here to help other people. You may do it by the example that you set. You know, a lot of athletes, the best athletes in the world, they may do some charity and whatnot, but their real passion and joy is getting better at their sport, pushing themselves physically, and that's okay. Because that inspires other people and shows others what's possible. And hopefully they're doing it with good virtues and values, and that's what really creates a good example for other people. So yours may not be going out there and building charities and that kind of thing, which so far for me, that's not my thing either. But through the way that you live, through the example that you set, you can help other people, whether it's directly or indirectly. And so I highly encourage yourself to write that your answer to that question down. Pause this video, ask yourself, if I had just 3 months left to live, what would I do with my time? That'll give you a lot of clarity in your life purpose. So the next part of this process I'm calling reality rewrite is to adopt empowering beliefs. You get to choose the beliefs in your head. It may take time and effort to sort of rewire your brain to think in that way, but there are certain ways of thinking that are going to make your life better. Remember, come back to the problem we have with rewiring beliefs is a lot of times we're thinking in terms of like, is this true or not true? That obviously matters, but what also matters is, does holding this belief make my life better or worse? And so one belief I'd encourage you to adopt is the idea that anything is possible. Now, we talked about last time, if you're 40 years old and you're 5'2", you're not making it in an MBA. But almost anything else is possible. So if anybody else has done anything that you want to do, you can do it also. Having that idea is going to give you more energy than if you think, well, there's 72 reasons why I can't do this, and my sister didn't do this, and I came from this bad background, so I can't do this. Maybe all of that is true, but does believing all that stuff make your life better, more expansive, more positive, and a better example for others? I don't think so. So big one is anything is possible. Another one that we've talked about is that you can change your beliefs. That may be the most important belief of all, is that you can change your beliefs. Another one, kind of similar to what we've been talking about, is the more good you do for others, the more good that comes to you. I don't necessarily even believe in some mystical form of karma that if I do something good, then, the universe is sort of changing and good stuff is going to come back to me. There may be some truth to that. I have no idea. But what I know for sure is true, that if you're out there doing a lot of good things for other people, treating people well, being nice, doing big things, small things for other people, you now have this army of people who want to reciprocate. And as we know in marketing, reciprocity is one of the most impactful factors when it comes to driving human behavior. And so if you're out there doing good things for other people, giving to other people, one way or another, they're going to reciprocate. It could be a positive comment to you. It could be buying something from you. It could be referring somebody to you. Who knows? But all of those things end up compounding over time. And the last one that I think does a lot of heavy lifting is setbacks are stepping stones. A lot of times, bad stuff will happen. But if we try to find the good in those, learn from them, and move on, that's a heck of a lot better than sort of, thinking in terms of disasters. Like, oh, why is this happening to me? Life is going down. That stuff's not going to do you any good. View any sort of setback as a stepping stone. Either you're going to get stronger or life is going to get better. For example, when I built my first business that just started exploding, we produced $1 million in sales in a week, which was fantastic. The problem was our payment processor wouldn't give us any of our money. They didn't know what we were doing to produce that many sales in a week, even though it was 100% legitimate. And so they fought us tooth and nail to actually give us the money. We had spent all this time preparing for that launch, doing all the customer service, all the sort of affiliate recruitment, all the marketing, all the videos, all that stuff, only to get nothing out of it because the payment processor held all of our money. We had to literally sue them to finally get our money. And so it was extremely annoying and depressing to do all this work and literally not get any of the money that you make. But I consider it a stepping stone and a very strong benefit because I've seen a lot of people who made a lot of money very quickly, they tend to burn it. For us, it always felt, even though we're producing a lot of sales, always felt that there was something that we kind of had to fight for to get what we wanted out of it. And I think that was good because it slowed us down a little bit, made us be more financially responsible, and I think ultimately created bigger and longer success. And so that's when I say setbacks are stepping stones. So part 2 of the reality rewrite is to adopt empowering beliefs. So the last step is to adopt higher standards for our lives. So we gave the example about the 4 different areas of our lives. And I asked you in the last video to rate yourself on each one of these. For example, you may say health is kind of 3 out of 10, got some work there, and so forth. And so you kind of rate yourselves on a 10 out of 10 scale on each one of these. The thing is I believe there are certain objective standards for each one of these. And a lot of us aren't meeting even those objective standards. So it's probably too much to kind of go in today, my opinion on the objective standards for each one of those. But what I want you to look at is look at what great is in these categories. It doesn't have to mean you're an Olympic athlete in terms of health, but people of your age, who is the best? Who is doing the best? Like, for example, I gave you the example of Laird Hamilton. Another one is Mark Sisson. He's in his 70s, still running sprints, riding his bicycle on the beach, working out, looking ripped, eating healthy, all those kind of things. That's an example of what's possible. Don't look at your peers or other people that are the average. Look at people that are doing the best in that category within reason. There's people that are probably 70 that spend, 6 hours a day, training for triathlons. You don't have to do that. But you can be a lot better than what you may consider as good in those different areas of your life. And so I have a friend who I was telling about this model and he seemed pretty excited about it. And I mentioned these 4 categories and he said, oh, I hadn't even thought about fulfillment. Because, he's recently had a daughter and so he's been very focused on raising her and he's doing a fantastic job. He's a smart guy, has a good job, but I think he's kind of coasting through his job. He's not that excited about it, not that thrilled about it. And I said, hey, there's this other level that's possible for you where you do a good job raising your daughter, you do a good job saving and investing like you're already doing, and you actually are fulfilled. You love the work that you do. You're able to do what you love most and probably make more money. That's all possible. So I encourage you to adopt higher standards for your life. And so to give you a kind of rundown of some of these basic ones, from a wealth standpoint, do you have the money to do everything that you want to do? Maybe you're not out there buying $300 million yachts, but you feel comfortable. You're able to go where you want. You have the financial freedom to do what you want. You can live where you want. You can provide for those that you care about. You have little debt relative to your income and net worth. You live in the kind of house that you want to live in. These things are all possible for you. So that's a matter of setting a higher standard for your life. On a health standpoint, do you feel good every day, physically and mentally? Are you able to do the activities that you love and that you enjoy and that are possible for people of your age, which is likely higher than the average people because something like, what is it, like 70+% of people are overweight, like 50% are obese, like it's insane. Like don't set your standards based on them, set your standards on what's actually good and what's actually possible for your life. In terms of relationships, you don't have to sacrifice caring for people that you love, taking care of family and friends just to build a business. Are you doing those things, or are you just kind of putting them off till later, to some future date? That's another category where you can meet some basic standards that'll dramatically elevate your life. And then on the fulfillment side, are you doing work that you love and you enjoy? Now you may still need to keep your job or build your business, but that doesn't mean you can't incorporate aspects either inside your work or outside your work that light you up and make you feel excited about life. And so I encourage you to raise your standards when it comes to these certain areas. You may feel like you're doing pretty good, but in the back of your head, you know you're really, struggling in a certain area and you don't have high enough standards. I encourage you to get around people who are operating at higher levels in those areas of your life. And so go through that exercise that we went through, because I believe there's another rung to this thing. So if I were to draw another circle, as straight as I possibly can, another circle around here. And so let's say if you were to, max this thing out and you were to do, 10 out of 10 in all of these areas. So if I were to extend out all of these categories, health, wealth, fulfillment, relationships, I believe there's a certain level right here, call it like at least a 7 out of 10 in all of these, that you receive a big upgrade in your life. A lot happier, a lot more fulfilled. And so that's meeting all of those kind of basic standards. You've got good health, you've got the wealth that you need, you've got good relationships, you've got fulfillment. That's when I believe life gets amazing. And I believe from there on, you can decide, is that how you want to live? Or do you want to focus on one of these areas and, becoming, extremely wealthy? Or you really want to focus on your health? Or you want maximum fulfillment? Or you want to really devote your life to improving relationships? Any of those answers is fine. But I think first thing you want to do is get all of these areas up to a high level of standards based on what's possible and what's going to create the best life for you. So to wrap up, the big idea here is to choose beliefs and standards based on what's going to create the best life for you. All of that is within your power, and you get to choose that stuff using some of the tools that we've talked about here. Now in the next video number 3 of this series of the Inner Power Protocol, I'm going to walk through a simple morning process that you can do with 3 questions. I call it the 3 G's, and you can do it in 5 minutes or less. That'll prime your brain to achieve far more and unlock greater energy that'll last you throughout the entire day. I've been using this process myself for a long time. It works fantastically. For now, I'd like you to take one of those 3 concepts that we talked about: raising your standards, adopting empowering beliefs, or using the life purpose question, and apply them. Don't just listen to me talk about this stuff. Go out there and apply those in your life, at least one of them. If necessary, go back and rewatch that part of the video, pause the video, do that activity, and because it's your life you have to live. I'm just sharing this stuff because I found it valuable, but I can't force you to do any of this. So I encourage you to use this, but the choice is yours. So as one final tool as we part, is I'd like you to think of the thoughts that you're having in your mind right now. Maybe you think this is super cool and inspiring. Maybe you think I could use some of this. Maybe you think some of this stuff will not work for me. Maybe you think Matt's full of BS and he's just making stuff up and I don't understand how any of this is valuable. Any of those are perfectly fine and valid thoughts. So what I encourage you to ask yourself is the belief that I currently have likely to produce the best life for me? And if not, what belief can I adopt that's going to dramatically improve my life? I'll see you in the next video. Hey there and welcome back. So I want to tell you a quick story about a guy that I came across when I spent something like 4 years studying value investing, Warren Buffett, which is a whole other story in and of itself. But I came across this one investor that's not very well known. His name is Arthur Vandenberg. And so he and his family lived right down the street from Anne Frank during the Holocaust. And both of his parents actually ended up going to Auschwitz. And he was separated, did not end up making it there, fortunately, but then had a terrible time with different homes he had to go through to finally get out. And so he ended up malnourished. Fortunately, his parents both survived Auschwitz and were reunited. And he was just in a terrible mental place, physical place. And so that was where he was starting at. And from there, he ended up changing how his mind thought over the decades of his life, to become an extremely successful investor, a very wise and honest and honorable person, somebody that I respect and admire a ton, especially for how he uses his mind with no formal education to compete in an area where everyone's got Harvard MBAs and everything like that in the investment management business. And so he's shown the power of using your mind to create what you want in your life. And part of it comes down to fueling your mind with the right thoughts and beliefs every single day. So right now we are at video number 3 of this series. So we are on the 3rd step, which is to activate. So far we've talked about accepting where you're at and the goals that you really want to accomplish. We've talked about adopting better beliefs. And then now we're at the 3rd of the 4th steps, which is to activate. So what we're going to talk about today is something that I call priming. And I'm going to give you 3 steps to do this. But first, just to show you the power of this. So around 25 years old, I was taking pre-workout supplements every day before working out. And back then they were not very well regulated. I don't think people really understood them. So they had all kinds of stuff in there that's, I think, ended up becoming illegal. Who knows what kind of stuff they were jacking you up. I mean, I would take this thing, wake up at 5 a.m., 15 minutes later, I was ready for the workout of my life. But I knew this was not good for me. I'd be itching and probably had an extreme amount of caffeine in there and who knows what else. So I was like, I gotta stop taking this stuff. So I ended up taking the tub of it and just throwing it away. Next time I had a workout, I went and bought more of it at the store on the way. And then I was like, okay, well, if it's that easy, that's not a good solution. So I ended up basically putting it up in my attic, a little bit of friction there. Next day I went to work out, went and got it out of my attic. So then I was like, okay, I need a little more friction than that. So I put it in a plastic bag and then actually put that in a safe, a locked safe. And that was enough to break that addiction of pre-workout, which is pretty ridiculous and probably why those things got banned. And so the reason I tell you this is that our environment matters a lot. And so, you know, we hear more common examples of if you're overweight and trying to lose weight, then definitely don't keep a jar of cookies on your counter. And so the same thing applies though to our mental environment. What's going on in your head every single day while you're out there trying to do the things that matter most to you. So you've set a goal in the last video. How are you actually going to accomplish that? So we've talked about beliefs, which matter a ton, but on a day-to-day basis, life is very unpredictable. Who knows what's going to happen? Something weird could happen in the news, something could happen locally, something could happen with a neighbor. You can't control all of those things. So that means you need a way to prepare yourself for the stuff that you can't control. And what you can control is what you put into your mind every morning. And so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be priming your mind to prepare for the uncertainties of the day. Now, hopefully by doing this stuff, focusing on the right beliefs, focusing on the right goals, living with good values, all those kind of things will reduce some of that negative uncertainty that comes around. I mean, we all know somebody who's just constantly having issues because they're not a good person and they're constantly making dumb decisions. So they kind of bring some of that on themselves, but there's still, at least half of it that we can't control no matter what you do. So you've got to find a way to mentally prepare yourself every single day. It's almost like warming up before you go work out. You need a way to prime your muscles and your nervous system before you go out there and lift heavy weights, run sprints, play sports, or whatever. You need to do the same thing for your mind every single day. So the first thing that I recommend starting with, and I do this every morning, is what I call the 3 Gs. So this is a way to sort of prime your brain to have a more positive outlook. So here's what this looks like. So 3 Gs, this takes as little as 4 minutes every single morning. So number 1, gratitude. So this is thinking about, I've read a lot of different books on happiness and, gratitude is a very common practice. One trick to do is to think of new stuff. And so I try to think of things from the day before or that morning, stuff that I haven't, just been like, oh, I'm happy for my health. I'm happy for, having money, all that kind of stuff. Try to think of something new and specific. And a lot of that material for me comes from good things, good interactions I've had with other people, stuff people have done for me, things that I've am grateful for in life related to the previous day or stuff I just haven't thought of before. So the more new material you can come up with every morning, I try to think of, 3 or 4 different things that I haven't focused on a lot yet. So this whole process takes 4 minutes. So maybe that part, I don't really time this, but maybe that part is a minute or so. And number 2, what's good. So this is getting myself to look at the things in life that are currently going well. So for example, if I have a business deal, it's things that haven't fully realized yet, but I want to think more positively about them, because we can always sort of catastrophize. We can always think, oh, this is going to go terribly. I've heard different opinions. I mean, some people say, having lower expectations because everything above that is positive is a better way to live. I don't necessarily agree at this stage. I prefer to think more favorably. I try to think about things that are going on right now that could be going even better. So for example, like right now I have a business deal going on. We don't really know how it's going to turn out, but so far all is going well. It's not fully realized yet. So I like to think about those good things. If I'm working on a workout program, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting faster, I'm getting healthier. Those things are going well. I have other cool things that are coming up in the future that are also going well. So I'm forcing myself to pick out those positive things for a minute or two. And then the last one is get to do list. So rather than, we all have to-do lists, I prefer to think of them as get to do lists. Because no matter what's on your list, you're choosing to do it. You don't have to do anything. You could just sit there and literally do nothing. Who knows what consequences, depending on your life situation, will come if you do nothing, but that is your choice. You don't have to do anything. And so I prefer to look at these things as get to do. So no matter what is on my to-do list, the things that I feel like I need to do that day, I prefer to look at them as things that I get to do. So I try to think of why am I doing this and what's positive about that? If it's okay, I got to go to the grocery store or something, then it's I get to go buy food. I get to go make healthy meals. I get to go nourish myself and learn what's out there. So there's a lot of ways you can look at almost anything on your possible to-do list in a better light. Because if you're going to do it anyways, you might as well think better about it. And so these are the 3 steps that I try to walk through every single morning. And I'll literally just sit on my chair, have my cup of coffee. My dog's usually sitting on the floor next to me. And I'll think about these things. It almost would look like I'm meditating, I guess. Maybe it is a form of meditation. But I'll just sit there quietly for 4 or 5 minutes, run through these 3 things in my head. And then, sometimes, we have a house in Colorado and a house in Austin, and we've got a dog. So a lot of times we drive. And sometimes we'll do that drive in one day. So I don't want to add anything else to my morning. Sometimes we'll leave at 4 a.m. And so I'll literally do these things while I'm getting ready that day in my head or on the drive. I don't obviously close my eyes, but we'll think of these things while I'm driving. And you can do this stuff anywhere, no matter what you have going on. It's just a matter of directing where your mind goes rather than just letting external events determine where it goes throughout the day. And so the second aspect of priming is, once you've kind of put your mind in a good state, the next one is something I heard Charlie Munger called Granny's Rule. Eat your carrots before dessert is kind of what he was talking about. Do the hard thing first. And so that's the thing that's most important that you probably don't want to do, but is going to move your life forward the most. So if we were to go back and look at that wheel that we talked about that had your health, wealth, relationships, and fulfillment, it's likely the lowest area on there. So for me, I've been working out so long that to me it's pleasurable. Workout to me is almost a reward. As crazy as it may seem to other people, but I'm not that uncommon. There's a lot of people who feel the same way that have just built up that habit. And so that's not a thing I need to do first thing in the morning. But if you're unhealthy and you haven't built that habit, that may be the thing you need to do first thing every single morning. For me, working on more the fulfillment side, I try to work on things that I think are not just about making money, but are about doing more good in the world. Those are the things that I need to work on more because by default, I'm gonna, work out, have fun, try to make money. Those are all things that I don't need to force myself to do. And so that's where I recommend applying Granny's Rule. This is another way to prime your brain to get an early win in the morning. So focus on that thing first thing. And the third one of priming is your environment. So kind of going back to the pre-workout example, you want to engineer your physical environment if possible to accomplish what you want. I really discovered this when I was in college and, I had always done, fairly well in school, but never exceptional until I discovered the 9th floor of the library in college. It was extremely quiet. It was basically a no talking zone. They had little tiny desks you could sit in, but it was silent. You could hear somebody tapping their pen if they were. And so when I started studying up there, I would do 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break, listen to some music, 50 minutes, 10-minute break, and I would do maybe 2 or 3 of those per night. All of a sudden, my grades skyrocketed. I had engineered my environment to focus. And so no matter what it is that you want to accomplish, you can apply that same thing. Far too many of us, think we want to grind and hustle and whatever, but we're checking social media, we're looking at stuff, we're looking at news, we're following politicians, all this kind of stuff that likely is not really going to support our goals. So engineering your physical environment, extremely important. So look at your environment right now, literally where you're at. Does it support what you want to accomplish? If not, change something or go somewhere else. The other thing is engineering your social environment. And so I believe you can't get rid of toxic people fast enough. They're just going to ruin your life. Now, that may be a family member that you have to see. Limit your time to the absolute bare minimum. My opinion, life is too short to sort of let somebody else bring you down. And so look at your physical environment, your social environment, because we've already talked about the mental environment aspect. And this is how you prime yourself to accomplish more. A lot of this is kind of saying no. It's not necessarily adding a lot to your plate. It's saying no to distractions, saying no to wasting your mornings, saying no to let your mind wander wherever, saying no to certain people. And so fortunately, it's not like you have to add 52 things to your list. You just have to choose what goes in your head and your physical environment. And that's how you prime yourself for greater success. So the big point here is that what comes at you each day is unpredictable, but you can choose what goes into your mind, which allows you to handle how you deal with what comes at you every single day. And you do that through these 3 steps of priming, the 3 G's, controlling your environment, and using Granny's rule. So now that we've gone this far, in the 4th and final video, I'm going to give you the number 1 best strategy to accelerate your success in business, marketing, sales, and really any area of your life. It's a hack that a lot of people have talked about. Tony Robbins has talked about it for a long time. I've heard other people completely unrelated, very successful investors, even Warren Buffett in a letter he literally just wrote for Thanksgiving at 95 years old, talked about this principle. So we'll cover that in the next video now that you're ready for it. Now, what I'd like you to do is to apply the 3 G's every single day for the next 7 days. Just a few minutes every morning. Gratitude, what's good, and then your get-to-do list. Spend 3 to 5 minutes doing that every single morning and let me know how it goes. Now, I started with Arnold Vandenberg, so I'd like to cover a quick quote by him in a podcast episode he just did. He said, "The main reason people suffer is selfishness. The real secret to life is overcoming that selfishness that we're geared for. We're not programmed to be happy, we're programmed to survive. And that doesn't necessarily make you happy. The secret to life is to overcome your selfishness to be able to give. That's love." So that's where it ties back to the last video where we talked about your calling question, which I believe one way or another is all going to tie back to doing stuff for other people. So keep that lesson in mind as you apply the 3 G's over the next 7 days, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey there, and welcome back to the 4th and final video of the Inner Power Protocol. So to start, I'd like to tell you a quick story about something that happened in 2001. In 2001, the dot-com crash had just happened. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, didn't quite know what to do. He ended up having a meeting with Jim Sinegal, the founder of Costco. And so in that meeting, Jim Sinegal explained how they were able to sell so much stuff dirt cheap by eliminating unnecessary costs, and he explained their membership program model to them. Jeff Bezos, 3 days later, had a meeting with his team, and then they revamped all of their pricing, and they sort of doubled down on the idea of being the lowest cost provider anywhere. And then 4 years later, they launched their membership program, Amazon Prime. So there are 3 powerful accelerators, or as I'm going to call them in this video, master models in that one story, and we're going to go through 4 of them in today's video. So far, we've covered the first 3 steps of the Inner Power Protocol. Step number 1, which we covered in video number 1, which was to accept. Accept where you're at today with your life, with those 4 categories that we talked about, the 4 engines of life, and with respect to the goals that you have for your life. You had these big goals that you set, but at some point you likely started shrinking them down, started settling for less. I wanted you to reimagine those big goals you had for your life and even consider 10xing them just to try that on for size and see if it reignites a passion in you. So goal number 1 was to be ruthlessly honest about where you're at today in your life and also where you really want to be if anything was possible. Then Step number 2 was adopt. Adopt powerful beliefs that can transform your life. You likely got the beliefs in your head because of parents, friends, family, life experiences, movies you've watched, songs you listen to. We get all this stuff in our head over decades of living, but some of it may not even be true. But more importantly, whether it's true or not, some stuff is not really 100% clear, and so we get to choose what goes into our mind, not based on some scientific analysis of what's most true when a lot of this stuff it's really hard to figure out, but we get to decide what goes into our mind based on what serves us best. What beliefs are going to create the best life for us? One of those big ones is to believe that anything is possible. If somebody else has done something, that means you can likely do it too. And I believe by believing that, you'll have a much better life. Another one is to realize that the purpose of life, I believe, all comes down to doing good for other people. Your expression of that may be widely different than mine, which is totally fine. But I believe by realizing that and adopting the belief that the more you give, the more you get, the better your life is going to be. So step number 2 was all about adopting beliefs that empower you. Step number 3, which was to activate. So activate and prime your brain every single day, just as if you were going to go to work out, you do a warm-up before. Warm up your mind and your emotional stability and resilience before you start working and facing the day every day. So I gave you the 3 G's that I apply every single morning. Gratitude, what's good, looking at the good stuff going on in my life, the good stuff that's transpiring, that's coming forward in the future. And the third, turning my to-do list into a get-to-do list. Those things alone are basically just forcing my brain and can force your brain to look at the positive stuff in life. Who do you want to work with more? Somebody who's always negative, always thinks everything is going to go wrong? Or the person who's positive, inspiring, and believes everything is going to go well? Also, who do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? I personally would choose the latter. And so that's what I'm helping you adopt, so that no matter what happens each day, you stay on track towards those bigger goals you have for your life. So that all brings us to the 4th and final step of the Inner Power Protocol, which is to accelerate. A lot of the teaching that I've done on business strategies, all that kind of stuff, kind of jumps straight to number 4. We didn't talk a lot about looking at your beliefs, about looking at your current situation versus your bigger goals, about priming your brain every single day. But I've come to realize that that stuff is almost a prerequisite, a required prerequisite before you start applying all the business strategies. I've taught so many people how to build businesses, and you know a kind of depressing fact is that anytime we would sell a course on how to build a business, only about 10% of people would ever actually even get a product live. Even though what we found out when we looked at the data years ago, if they actually got a product live, they did really well on average. But so many people would never get a product live because all that other stuff they hadn't nailed down. So hopefully by this point, you've been applying some of that stuff. And more importantly, hopefully you keep applying it every single day until it becomes a habit. So that then you can get the most value out of these accelerators, or as I'm going to call them, master models. These are what's going to help you take whatever it is that you want to accomplish in your mental state and apply it so much faster. These are proven, some of them, especially one, is going to sound quite simple, but these are extremely powerful, and these are what can create whatever level of success that you want in life. So step 4 is to accelerate, and you're going to learn exactly how to close the gap between what you want most in life and your current reality. And what we're going to cover are 4 of the top master models that you can apply to achieve literally anything in your life across any domain: wealth, business, finances, health, relationships, literally anything you want to improve in your life. So I discovered this concept of sort of meta mental models when I had been building my businesses for so long, had a lot of ups and downs. And what I realized at some point is there's got to be an easier way to build businesses. I had studied Richard Branson. I'd kind of looked from the outside about Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, but I decided to go really deep. I wanted to use Warren Buffett as a mentor and a model for my own life. And so I read every single thing that I could find that was written about him or by him. I spent 4 years of my life doing this. I almost completely checked out of my businesses, but I studied in depth. I even attended his annual meetings 3 times out in Omaha. And it was an amazing experience. And through that experience, I learned so much about business, about his model, about how to run companies, and also how to invest. And so I started applying his systems and his frameworks to my own investment life. And I went from losing to the market. If I just had my money in an index fund, I would have been better off prior to that, to beating the market every single year since then. Now, does it mean I'm the world's greatest investor? No. It just means that I took what somebody else had figured out works, applied it religiously to my own investment approach, and I got good results. And I can get Warren Buffett level results because he's been doing it since he's 11 years old and it's his whole life. I do it almost as a hobby, and who knows if I'm even anywhere close to as naturally as inclined as he has to do any of that stuff. I can almost guarantee you that I'm not. But I took his frameworks, applied it to my life, got exceptional results, better than most people do when they're just winging it trying to invest on their own. But even more importantly, I learned this concept of these master mental models, especially from his late business partner, Charlie Munger, that says, if you read enough and you discover enough, there's these core ideas that can really drive your life forward. And so I've been taking note of some of these core ideas. And one of them is something that popped up in that story I told you with Jeff Bezos and Jim Sinegal, the founder of Costco, and also in my studying of Warren Buffett. So the first mental model is cloning. This is such a powerful tool. And so I used it by copying Warren Buffett's investment approach. Jeff Bezos used it by copying some elements of Costco and applying that to Amazon. I've used it in my e-commerce business to model my landing pages and ads off of other people's, my email strategies, my pricing strategy. Almost every single part of our business is modeled after somebody else. And most of their stuff is probably modeled after somebody else too. So this first concept of cloning is extremely powerful. As humans, we always want to be so creative and want to invent everything and do everything the hard way. It's so much easier in life if you just find somebody or something or some business that's already done what you want to do, then do exactly what they did. Go as closely as possible. Now, Jeff Bezos didn't build another brick and mortar retailer, he applied it online. So there's a little bit of a difference, but otherwise, big selection, low prices, annual membership model, a lot of that is very similar to what Costco did. I didn't invest in the same exact companies as Warren Buffett, but I tried to invest in companies with my own skill set, my own temperament, my own knowledge and experience, applying all the stuff that he had talked about for the kinds of companies to look for and invest in. And so same thing with our landing pages and marketing funnels. I'm not selling the same products, so I have to adopt them to ours, but I'm still trying to get as close as possible to the proven source. And so step number one, whether you're looking for a way to do marketing, a way to do business, a type of business to start, any of that kind of stuff, find somebody who's already done what you want to do and then clone them, clone their approach as closely as possible. The second master model is partnering. And so when I was building my first larger business, I had an e-commerce business doing about a couple $1,000,000 a year, but I felt like it was constantly stressful. I was having issues all over the place, even though sales were growing, profitability was difficult. And I was like, I'm really good at this one area of business, growing sales. I'm pretty terrible at everything else, managing people, dealing with operations, all that kind of stuff I didn't really want to have to deal with. I was like, if I just had a business partner, my life would be so easy. If I found somebody who did this area of business well while I could do everything else, we'd build something incredible. And I had one guy at the time who worked for my dad, but was kind of a consultant, had a lot of experience. He said, Matt, business partners make the good times better and the bad times less bad. And I believe that applies to any type of partnership you have in business or outside of business. So I ended up attending a high-level event, cost about $10,000 just to get around other successful business owners because I'm like, I need somebody I can work with. And so through that, I met a guy who was in a mastermind that he told me to join and made an introduction. I joined that mastermind, and that's how I met Jason Katzenbach. Jason Katzenbach and I created the first version of Amazing Selling Machine that went on to sell $100 million and help tens of thousands of people around the world build e-commerce businesses. All that was possible because Jason was really good at some aspects of business. I was really good at other aspects of business. We both were able to do what we did best. And that's how we were able to build something so incredible in a fairly short period of time. And so when in doubt, don't try to do everything on your own. And so this is why I'm such a big proponent of getting out there in the real world. getting out and going to conferences, going to events, going to masterminds. Meet people in person. Don't just stick behind your computer all day. That's how you make real connections that'll move your life and your business forward. And whether it's a formal partnership where you literally become legal business partners, or whether it's, more of a loose partnership where you're just sharing ideas and strategies, the more you can do that, the better. It's going to shortcut your path to success like almost nothing else. So that's the master model number 2, is partnering. The master model number 3 is going to sound the most basic, but it's potentially the most powerful. It's what I call reading for value. I don't do a lot of pleasurable reading, I guess you would quote unquote say, even though I really like reading. I'm always trying to solve some problem, solve a business problem, solve a fitness problem, solve a self-development problem. I read a ton of nonfiction books. I probably read 100 a year or so. And what I'm looking for is to triangulate good ideas. And so I'll go try to find people who've already done what I want to do, kind of tying back to cloning. I prefer not to read a bunch of books by academics and stuff, even though sometimes they have good ideas. But if I'm trying to solve a business problem, I want a person who's actually built a business. And so I'll try to find good sources like that. And then I'll buy 5 to 10 books on the same subject and try to triangulate the ideas. It may sound like a ton of reading, but it's less than you think, because once you get through 3 books on a certain topic, you can start skimming the other ones because they're just regurgitating the same information in most cases, and you'll be able to pick out the few things that are interesting. And so this is a thing where it's like, there is no excuse not to create what you want in life, because there's been so many books written on anything that you possibly want to learn that you can just go to a library, to a bookstore, to Amazon, start picking up and start reading. Charlie Munger would call it the word assiduity, and he said he likes that word because it basically means to sit on your ass and do it. And so that very much applies to reading. If you want to learn and improve any area of your life, pick up 5 to 10 books, triangulate the core ideas, apply that stuff in your life, and you'll be off to the races and can transform your life in almost any area. I've done it with investing, I've done it with reading. I mean, one of the ways that I became such a good marketer, especially copywriting, is I read every book on copywriting. And then I basically would read the book, I'd be applying it all day in my business. I'd be applying it to headlines, to body copy, to creating videos. I basically just read everything out there and then tested it and applied it in the real world. That was the entire secret to becoming really good at marketing and copywriting. And you can apply that to any area of your life that you want. So that's master model number 3, is reading for value. And the last master model that we'll cover is called two-way doors. So this concept actually comes from Jeff Bezos. He would talk a lot about, with his team, determining whether a certain path they were going to take, a new product launch, a marketing campaign, an operational strategy, whether any of that stuff was a one-way door or two-way door. A one-way door is something that, like, once you go through, you can't come back in. Huge change in your business. Easy example is getting a divorce. You can't come back in there because you likely sabotaged something completely in your relationship. Same thing with, completely changing the name of your business or the scope of the products or shutting down a business or any of that kind of stuff is kind of a one-way door. A two-way door, on the other hand, is something that you can jump into the other side, see if you like what's happening over there, and if you don't, go back through the door and you're back to ground zero. And so one way I kind of learned some of this, the painful way, is that we at one point hired a whole team of executives for our company, and one marketing guy, somehow we got committed, and I was guilty in the process too, but he was the one coordinating the stuff, is we got committed to basically $1 million marketing campaign in a completely new channel, which was podcast advertising. This was a decade ago, and we had no way to get out, and we had never run ads on that channel before. And so I ended up firing that marketing executive, and I contacted the people we were doing this campaign with. I was like, can we just shut all this off and not do any of this? They were like, well, you can either let the $1 million in ad spend run, or you basically have to pay $400,000 to get out of this and you get zero traffic. And I was like, okay, well, forget it. We'll just let it run. So we spent the $1 million and only made $250,000 in sales. It was terrible. And the dumbest part about that is we could have tested that same channel with like $20,000 and found out the same answer. So we committed ourselves to a one-way door where it could have very much been a two-way door. We spend the $20,000. If it doesn't work, then we're done. Like, that was not a big risk for us at the time. Fortunately, I learned from some of this stuff. And so 9 years later, when with Life Boost Coffee, we also wanted to test out a new form of podcast advertising. We actually advertised on the Rob Lowe show. He's a guy from Parks and Recreation. And I think it was about $20,000, $25,000 or so. But at the time, that was very small risk for us. So we didn't commit ourselves to $1 million marketing campaign like I stupidly did 9 years before. And so we ended up basically spending the 20, 25 grand. Didn't really work out, not a big risk. Life moved on, allows us to test other channels. And so whenever you're making any sort of decision in your business, think if it's a two-way door or one-way door. Because sometimes people, they'll overcommit themselves to something like we did, and it causes a lot of pain. Another big risk though, is some people don't take enough risks because they think everything is a one-way door. When in reality, it's like, what's the worst that can happen if this doesn't go well? If you launch a new product and it costs you a few grand to get off the ground, nobody wants it, who cares? If you test a new marketing channel with a small amount of money, nobody wants it, who cares? If you launch a new business, and as long as you don't overcommit yourself financially, and you find out within 6 months or something like that with a few $1,000s of risk, whether this business is good or not, no problem, that's a good risk worth taking. Both of my larger companies, Amazing.com and Life Boost Coffee, both started off as two-way doors. I partnered up with Charles for Life Boost Coffee, didn't put a lot of money in, and if it worked out, we made a bunch of money. If it didn't work out, we were both back to where we started. Fortunately, it worked out very well. Same thing with Jason. I had this knowledge of how to sell on Amazon. He had this experience of doing information product launches. We came together, didn't really put much money, put maybe a few months worth of time in, and then if it worked out, we'd be off to the races. If it didn't work out, didn't matter. Both of these kind of worked out. I've had a lot of stuff that did not work out, but knowing this concept of whether you're entering into a one-way door or two-way door will help you make a lot more logical decisions about what to do and how fast to move. Because if it's a two-way door, you can move extremely fast. If it's a one-way door, you better be careful. So those are the 4 main master models that'll help accelerate your success. You can apply any one of these, and if you just used one of these, and as Charlie Munger would say, take a simple idea and take it seriously. If you just seriously applied just one of these, and I think it could transform your entire life. If you apply all 4, who knows what's possible. So in conclusion, the big idea in today's video is that a few core ideas, accelerators, or master models carry so much weight and can absolutely transform your life if you've done the necessary preparation, which you learned how to do in the first 3 videos. So the first thing I asked you in the first video of the Inner Power Protocol, I gave a quote from Peter Thiel that said, what's preventing you from achieving your 10-year goals in the next 6 months? Now with these 4 videos and these 4 steps, you have no excuse. You have everything that you need to achieve your most ambitious goals way faster. So go back through these 4 videos, apply everything that's in them, keep applying them again and again. This has been kind of my life's work of figuring this stuff out just for myself over the past 20 years. And I'm super excited I've been able to share it with you. And thank you for joining me in the Inner Power Protocol. And hopefully I get to see you in the future.